Hello and welcome to Minter Dialogue, episode number 449. My name is Minter Dial, and I'm your host for this podcast, a proud member of the Evergreen Podcast Network. For more information, or to check out other shows on the network, please do visit evergreenpodcasts.com. I'd also like to give a shout out and thanks to Ant1 for the 5-star review put up on Apple Podcasts. This week's interview is with Claire Boonstra. Claire is a Dutch entrepreneur who co-founded the acclaimed Layar, the augmented reality mobile platform that was sold to Blippar in 2014. In 2012, Claire founded Operation Education, a non-profit organization enabling educational leaders to lead the change. In this conversation with Claire, we discuss the amazing World War II story that united us, her founder story, and lessons learned at Layar, the value of emotions, and most saliently, her deep-rooted mission to transform education, a powerful purpose. You'll find all the show notes on minterdial.com. Please do consider to drop in your rating, and don't forget to subscribe to catch all the future episodes. Now for the show with Claire. Claire Boonstra, wow, it's been quite a while since I've wanted to have you on my show. You're a lady who's an entrepreneur, co-founded this wonderful startup called Layar, and now you are on this super interesting journey around education. In your own words, how would you like to describe yourself, Claire?
Oh, thanks, Minter. I'm basically a world citizen. Really engaged with what is happening actually on the planet, in society, with people. And I have gained a lot of life experience in which I had a lot of question marks above my head saying, hey, this is not logical, and in which actually triggered me to think about where to start when we want to solve some of the biggest world problems, and that's in education. So that's why I started Operation Education 9 years ago.
Something that unites us, Claire, and outside of our interests in technology, is a story about the Second World War.
Yes,
and it's remarkably fun, deep sense of fulfillment. The notion of connecting into your family, your mom, and your story. In a few words, give us what your story is in the Second World War, because it's quite an extraordinary experience.
Yeah, it is. Okay. In short, my mother, Katja Boonstra, she was born in Java, in Indonesia, because her father was serving on the Dutch in the Dutch submarine in the Navy, protecting the Dutch, between brackets, Indies, against the Japanese. And my grandfather, so my mother's father, was killed on a submarine by a Japanese torpedo. And obviously it was a very difficult time for my mother as a baby, and her mother, my grandmother, but they survived. And they grew up, of course, going through a lot of struggles. But 70 years in her life, the submarine on which her father had died was still missing. And she had set up a foundation to search for the 7 still missing Dutch submarines after World War II. And many of these submarines had been found thanks to her, all the things that she had set up together with some people around her. But our submarine was still missing, which led us I have to think which year it was, somewhere in my 20s, my sister and I, together with my mother, went on an expedition to try to find our submarine. And we didn't succeed, unfortunately. However, we did some ceremony, and we said on board that probably something still needed to happen before the submarine could be found. Well, some truly extraordinary things did happen. First of all, my mother, she knew that her father was torpedoed by a Japanese submarine. But some day she got a phone call from the commander of the Dutch submarine saying there's a Japanese guy here wanting to pay tribute to our submarine because his father was also torpedoed by a British submarine. And he's also in search of his father. Well, this guy, his name is Akira Tsurukame. And when my mother heard this, she immediately tried to get in touch with him, and she tried all the possible channels, and she managed to get hold of him, and they met each other that day or the day after. And immediately from this day onward, a very, very deep respect, deep relationship actually was born between them, because they all were in search of their father, and they all basically torpedoed each other. And this was very, very special. And we also had quite a lot of reunions as a family, as 3 families, and we planted peace trees in all three countries, in Japan, in the UK, actually in Ireland, where they were living, and in the Netherlands. And it's always very humbling to reflect actually on what happened and how it actually, it could all happen this way, basically, how we could actually be in war with each other, and how we could actually reconcile and be in peace with each other, and create very deep friendships. And actually, a few years later, actually our submarine was found. And the story still continues, because there's still one submarine still missing, and my mother is still on a quest to find him. And in the meantime, lots of interesting cross fertilization happens, which she also got to meet you, and you got to meet also Akira on your call. So there's a lot of fruitful exchanges happening right now.
Nuts are still falling from the tree. So the third family, of course, is related to the English, the Irish-based commander of the submarine that.
Indeed,
right?
and that's you're correct. That's the part of the story which is still missing, because indeed Akira Tsurukame, he told my mother that his father indeed was torpedoed, and together they figured out that indeed the commander of the third submarine was still alive and was living in a castle in Ireland. So indeed, our 3 families went to visit that castle and met each other there. Indeed, I forgot to mention that part, which is probably the best part of this whole story.
Well, it's such a, it's one of those vast stories with so many pieces to it. It's hard to put you on the spot and make you tell it in a short space, but it's certainly worth telling, and I've enjoyed immensely being part, at least my little part, in the story. So Claire, that's of course just a side hustle for you and your mum. Probably more important for your mum, but for you, it's a side hustle. I want to talk a little bit about Layar. So Layar is a startup which you co-founded in 2009 and sold in 2014 to Blipar. Give us the short story of what it is, where it is now, and most importantly, what did you learn from that lesson of the startup?
Yeah. Well, again, trying to make this short. It was such an amazing adventure. So actually, Layar was born in the same week that my first child was born, which is interesting. And it actually was a sort of a product of what was already happening in that space. Together with Raimo van der Klein and Maarten Lens-Fitzgerald, we had created Mobile Monday Amsterdam and a small company called Sparks Mobile. And we had a lot of ideas on how actually the mobile internet space could help to solve a lot of the world's problems or could make life much more interesting, etc. And we had already envisaged a way to actually overlay a digital world on top of the physical reality. And then came the first phone, the first Android phone, actually with the possibility to do that, because it was the first phone with a compass, a digital compass, which allowed you to point your phone, and then the compass would know in which direction you would actually look. And then together with the GPS locator, you could actually combine those two. So that was the idea. And immediately, we hired a developer somewhere far away in India, actually, who he made the first version. And Maarten created a wonderful video, actually, which showed how it would work in the city of Amsterdam, panning just in your image. And then we launched it in June. It was actually the first task I had coming back from maternity leave and making this a beautiful launch. And we're actually on the first day, the Dutch media were completely silent. They were not impressed at all. But the day afterwards, we were, the sort of headline news on all the blogs and papers we were reading ourselves, which was pretty awesome. So we were headlining on TechCrunch and Read Wide Web and all these titles. And 2 weeks later, we had a 2-page or something, or mega article in the New York Times, and we were featured on BBC and whatever. It was, well,
you won a prize at NetExplo.
Yeah, it was so from that moment on, the prizes came in and all the titles, and the investors were banging our doors immediately. So actually all the big names in investment, the big investors were also ringing our doorbell and wanting to talk to us. So we actually had the luxury position to choose the investors we wanted to work with. And so we gained, we had a lot of funding, ended up having 12.5 million funding in the first 1.5 years, and grew to 60 people, I believe, within a year and a half. So it was an amazing ride. And I guess the most amazing thing was actually that Samsung pre-installed our app on all their Galaxy devices across the globe, and they used our logo to market their own phones. So wherever we went, in an airplane, on landed or whatever airfield, there was our logo displayed. And yeah, it was an amazing ride, I have to say. But also the days, let's say in the conception of Layar, it was 2009, and we already knew that the crisis was coming. So we literally drew the Gartner's hype cycle, and we said in time, we are going to face a crisis. So we need to get a lot of investment money in right now, because there will be tough times. So this is also why we diluted in a very early stage, just because we also knew that we didn't have a business model yet. But we were so interesting that a lot of investors wanted to work with us. They really liked our team, they liked our vision, they liked the way we set it up, we worked, the way we recruited people, etc. So that was amazing. But after 3 years, 2.5 years, 3 years, we still didn't have a good business model. And so we changed, actually. We had invented a very interesting business model, which was actually to move from GPS-based augmented reality, because that's the technology, how it's called, to actually vision-based. So actually would make print interactive, and we had created a tool which you could upload a PDF of a printed page of a magazine or a book or whatever, and you could actually place drag and drop buttons, digital buttons on top of it. And that was the Layar creator, and that was actually our first real business model. And because it was in the print sphere, actually our investors decided to hire a new CEO with experience in the print, in the print business. And that was also the moment when I realized that that a different type of leadership was needed, and also a different type of leadership was recruited into the company. And I felt that I needed to make space in the broadest sense of the word. And that was also the moment when I started to realize, okay, what am I going to do next? And that's when I figured out I needed to do something in education. But so basically Layar was still active. I still had my shares. And actually my whole, all the titles I received from Layar, I mean, I was nominated like the most amazing titles, like most influential women in technology, top 5, most influential women in mobile, entrepreneur of the year, whatever, ridiculous titles. Being nominated as a tech pioneer by the World Economic Forum, a young global leader by the World Economic Forum, and I can go on. So it became my ticket to the future. At the sale of Layar to Blippar, actually, my shares were worthless. So, but it was in every sense the most amazing ride, and it gave me, people would listen to me because I had all these titles.
Gave you a platform.
It gave me a platform, and I said I called it my ticket to the future. Yeah.
So, Claire, I think this would be an opportune time to do a little video clip that I'd like to play for you and for us. And it concerns your TEDx talk that you made in 2012.
Yes.
It was called On Shift to Value-Centered Education. Of course, I'll put a link in the show notes, but here is the clip. You're only, I don't know if you can see it, but hopefully you're also going to hear it as well.
I really found my calling, my purpose. And yesterday, I announced to my team at Layar that I will be spending the rest of my time, majority of my time on this calling. And sorry, I'm emotional. But what am I going to do? I don't know yet. I've given myself half a year to explore first, and I want to share. I want to hear from all of you. I mean, there's so many things that have already been figured out, right? And so many ideas all out there. So please feed me, share with me your ideas, and I'm sure that we will find.
Just a quick snippet, Claire. As
yes.
I'm no doubt seen that a few times. Wondering if you could tell us about your emotion at that moment.
Yes.
What was going on in Claire's heart and mind?
Yeah. So a lot of things happened. So actually, I had decided already earlier on that summer that I was going to leave Layar, but the new CEO didn't allow me to announce it yet to the world. And I knew that I had a TED Talk planned in September. So during that summer, I had been working on this TED Talk and figuring out my story, figuring out what I actually wanted to do in education, because it was very unclear to me. I just had some ideas and visions and wonders, basically. So I'd been preparing this story, and the new CEO wasn't aware that I was, that I had this TED Talk planned. And actually the day before he said, okay, I think tomorrow is a good day for you to announce. And he literally didn't know about this TED Talk. So the next day became my coming out. And I just don't think that coincidence exists, basically. And underlying, that underlying emotion was, it was twofold or multiple layered, actually. It was also publicly saying goodbye to my baby. I really feel that I'm still the mother of Layar, and together with the two fathers, Raimo and Maarten, we create our baby, and we actually said goodbye to our baby and say, please, dear new dad, take good care of our baby. So that was one of the reasons for my emotions. And the other one is also that this whole feeling, in Dutch we say it comes from our toes. And that's, I later in that talk said, I have to do this. And this is how I still feel about doing stuff in education. I have to do this. It feels like such a deep calling. It feels like all of my life I sort of was preparing to do this. And it feels so deep and so fundamental and so necessary that I'm doing this. So that all contributed to actually the emotions on that same day. Yeah.
Do you think or did it surprise you, the emotion as it came out?
Well, it did overwhelm me. Yes, I wasn't. It wasn't a plan, basically. Yeah. But I also had learned about myself. I said, yes, sorry, I'm a bit emotional. And of course, I'm a quite emotional being. You know, I have been into tears on a lot of moments, but I also, and when I was still in working corporates, it was not allowed, and it was, brought up as to be
Totally.
a very strong person and don't show your emotions, you don't show your weakness. So I had learned to push it away. But I also had learned already by that time that my emotions, they come up as a moment of truth, basically, when something really deep touches me, that I know this is true. So I had become less hesitant about my emotions to just be there. And later the reactions were really amazing, and still until this day, I receive reactions from people saying, "Oh, I was so touched." And finally, somebody who sees and feels the same things as I do. Can we please drink coffee? And I literally received thousands of personal reactions in the minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, years after this talk.
It reminds me of the time when I broke down in a public audience. It was a press conference, and so lots of important people in the room. And then when I broke down, the first thing was like, oh God, how embarrassing is this? It's what's going through my mind. And because, this is not how we roll. This is not what we do as senior executives. And I was saying, apologizing, and oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And then, I was thinking, this is just disaster. But what I realized afterwards is that they didn't think less of me for crying. They connected more into me.
Indeed, what's said to the contrary. Yeah.
And it's a funny thing. Of course, it's not appropriate to manipulate. It's not appropriate to cry all the time or anything like that. But when it's that true something, it does move people.
It is, we are humans, and the more human we appear on a stage, wherever, the more we can connect, because we are very emotional beings. At least some of us are. I am an emotional being, and I know that from how I was actually sort of coded. And so yeah, I am very happy now when other people share their emotions, and your intuition knows when it's for real or not.
Of course.
So yeah, and it's usually the moments when people say they break. It's a mental breakdown between brackets. It's the moment when people's faces soften and their whole expression softens, and they sort of lay off their mask and become human. And
there's that little moment before where they're trying to hold it in, and then the bottom part of the face starts to melt, as you say.
Yeah.
So you found your calling. And I'm thinking most people who are listening maybe would love to have found a calling as deeply as you have. Obviously, there's no prescription, but at least tell us how you found your calling.
Yeah, the funny thing is that the whole topic of education has been in my system already for years, but I wasn't aware of it. I did find an essay that I wrote at age 17, and I somehow, by coincidence, found it back. We are not a very structured family, so somehow it appeared in a basket full of stuff for my teenage years, and in that was a bundle of essays which I had to write for school. They're not literal essays, but schoolwork and
not literary essays.
No, exactly, not literary, but I mean a schoolwork essay, and I wrote already exactly what I'm doing right now. I wrote an essay about the people that I knew from family members, good friends, people I had read about or which touched me, which were all in some way brilliant. They were all geniuses, but some were geniuses in math but were not good in language, or some were geniuses in just exactly understanding what would happen, or understanding situations, understanding people, but all of them didn't thrive in the system, and they were all sort of disregarded by the system, or they had many struggles with the system, especially the school system. And I ended up I concluded that essay with the words, "It would be so nice if people would be able to find their own or push their own boundaries. If only this would be possible in the future, if we would gain more understanding in the human psyche." And I received my teacher gave me a 7.5 out of 10 score. But most interesting is his remark that he wrote underneath. A slightly weak and a weak conclusion, such a noble wish based on a lot of idealism, but with very little sense of reality. And it's still this remark which I use in a lot of my talks, because what I noticed that people who work in education, teachers, almost all of them do this out of idealism. When you work in education, you do want to contribute something to the world, and it is, in my opinion, by far the most impactful job in the world. There's so much impact you can have on people's individual lives, and with that, on the future, basically, on the course of society. But a lot of them feel like, I started this out of idealism, but hey, can't do it, impossible, and they become a bit cynical. And this is also literally what my teacher, who wrote this comment, what he stated in his classes. He was a Dutch literature teacher, but he was also teaching us about the political system. He literally said, when you're young, you're progressive, you're left, and when you grow older, you become more cynical, and then you become more conservative, and you vote right. And actually, when I rediscovered this essay, long live social media, I could reconnect with him, and we had some very interesting talks about writing a good essay and drawing logical conclusions, but especially about being, somebody who wants to improve the state of the world, and so we had a good laugh together. Him about stating this, and me about actually saying bye to this conclusion, because what I'm working on today is actually to unleash the idealism again in all these teachers, and to make them feel that they are indeed capable of being of so much influences, positive impact to people and to the world. So I don't want them to feel cynical anymore.
Right, you mentioned politician or political thought, but actually I think politicians come in with idealism, but they don't go cynical, they go corrupt. That's another problem.
Not all of them.
As far as of course not, fortunately, but and not all teachers go cynical.
No, luckily not, but a lot of people. So what I've noticed is that a lot of people. So very briefly, what I'm trying to do is to actually the education system has become a system in which we actually select the higher versus lower. And all our tests are based on making that selection. And it is such a stupid way of dividing humans into higher versus lower groups. It's simply not true that you can base this on a standardized test. And I could talk about this for hours because there's a lot of substantiation to this. But basically, it's quite stupid. And a lot of people know this, but they feel that they are not capable of doing anything, that they are just, limited by the system. And because the system is simply this way. And what I mostly do, actually, the core of my work is to make people think about the purpose of education again and make them have a conversation about it. Because we do not have that conversation often enough. We almost do not have it because we want to stay away from ideology. That's at least in my country, in the Netherlands. But in most countries, we do not dare to talk about it. But when we do talk about the purpose of education, people do have very, very similar answers. People always state, at least if you ask a bit deeper and a bit further, people do state that the purpose of education is to learn to understand who you are, where you stand, what you stand for, where you're heading in life, and learning to unleash your own unique and full, maybe even infinite potential. People say that the purpose of education is to learn life together and to learn how to live together. And people state that the purpose is to learn to take responsibility for your own life and for the world we strive for. And what do we strive for? Well, a happy, healthy, sustainable, thriving, prospering world. Right? Those are the answers that people typically give. And so we are very aligned on the purpose, but we don't know that the others give similar answers. So, and how we act is that we assume that others are not aware of this or do not think this way, and assume that therefore we should not talk about it and should just adjust ourselves to how the system simply is and keep on, doing things in line with the system. But yeah, so what I try to do is to make people think about why we do the things the way we do. And if the actions are not in line with what we feel is the purpose, that we should just stop and change. And do not, and with Operation Education, we enable, we ignite, unleash, and enable actually people to bring their actions in line with what they think the purpose of education is, and to make space for that and change the system.
Education is one of those topics that pretty much everybody has an opinion on.
Yep.
Pretty much everybody, I say pretty much because there are, of course, contrary examples, go to school. And typically they have an experience and a memory and then an opinion on what is education. So I spent a lot of time in education, but in a corporate world, and it's not learning for development education. It was about actually using education to inspire, inform, and improve hairdressers, and not just to cut hair and make you look a beautiful person, but to make them feel confident. And our claim was to earn a better living and live a better life. And so we really embodied in a corporate world, even though all we were doing was selling shampoos, a bigger notion of education. So Operation Education, give us a look at where you are now with this project to inspire and help people to enact a different form of education.
So Operation Education has actually two sides. One side is actually a non-profit, an NGO, basically, which we have a lot of programs and actually programs which we can run on schools, and when schools or school teams or director teams ask us to help them to improve their education. And we have programs for leaders, leadership programs. On the other side, we are actually a movement, an ecosystem, as I have called it from the start, from my TED Talk. I said in the TED Talk, I want to create an education development ecosystem. And ever since that day, I've been sort of building that ecosystem, which is by default a very, an organic thing. It's not an organization. It's a living creature, basically. And it consists of people. Our ecosystem consists of people who decide or choose not to feel or be the victim of the system, but to people who want to take responsibility to do things more in line with the purpose of education, and who actually lead by example, by creating schools or practices in their classrooms, but mostly on a leadership level as school leaders, to change school infrastructures, learning infrastructures, where actually learners, usually they're young people, but actually learners of all ages, because also the teachers are learners, ideally, learn to indeed figure out who they are, to unleash their own potential, to continuously develop, to learn, how do we create this society we strive for. And I more and more use the word regenerative, to actually regenerate people, to regenerate society, regenerate Mother Earth, basically, to create learning environments where everybody is continuously working on what am I actually doing here? What am I interested in?
Who am I?
Indeed, who am I? So literally, one of the schools that I really love is called a school called Agora. And all the learners, they have three main questions. Who am I? What am I good at? And what do I want? What am I longing for in life? Where am I heading? And
presumably linking back to the initial concept of the Agora, where everyone's speaking in a democratic process.
The Greek marketplace, basically. Indeed, exactly. That's why they chose that name. And what you see then is a school which even manages to exist in the publicly funded Dutch school system as a secondary school. It started as a secondary school, so school for children ages 12 to 18, and they completely let go of all the levels. In the Dutch system, as in many other systems, the children are typically put in layers or baskets of higher versus lower, and they completely let go of that thinking. They put all these children of all levels together and working on these challenges, and working on the things that they are truly, truly interested in to learn. And they're being guided by teachers. They're called Agorian masters, who actually don't teach them the subjects, but who continuously question them on what actually they want to learn, how they're going to approach that learning, who they could contact for that, and enabling them to bring them in touch with the places and the people where the knowledge lies, which they need to solve their problem or to do their thing. And actually enabling them to come into the world, basically, to learn in relation with the world, with the environment, because learning is not something you do for yourself. Learning is something that you most likely do for somebody else and with somebody else in relationship to society, to the world. So when you are in such a school, you just see people who are, twinkling eyes, sparkling eyes, who are really engaged with what they're learning. None of them would ever say that school is, dull or stupid or whatever. They love to go to school because for them it's a place where they learn meaningful things and they are self-directed. and also the teachers are learning, and everybody around the school is learning, and that it's a thriving place. And yeah, you just feel on a deeper level that what is happening there is the right thing. It's just an example.
Sure. I wanted to capitalize on the use of Layar in a different context for you and how it creeping back into your life. What I'm thinking about, because as you know, I spend a lot of time thinking about education also, is it capitalizes, or it seems to resonate with the Finnish system, where they give responsibility to the children. There's a sort of a knowledge that they have to run their own education and are responsible for their learning. And it also makes me think of the wonderful TED Talk by Ricardo Semler, the Brazilian, who says, why don't we teach love in school? Why don't we teach how to make a bicycle in school and fill out our taxes? Because that is what we need in life.
Yeah.
What are the maybe the impulses and inspirations for you as you drive forward?
Yeah. Oh, so many. These people inspire me. So what I spend a lot of time on, also in my sessions I do with schools and with leaders, is to make people realize where we come from. So we live in a system, in a legacy system, which was created by a lot of people, by thinkers, by ideas which touch fertile grounds in that period. For example, the whole idea that you can think in average, and based on the average, think in higher versus lower, and standardization, etc. I have spent a lot of time on researching actually the system, and researching questions such as, why do we have classrooms, and why do we group children according to birth year? Why do we have separate subjects? Why do we give grades? Why homework? Why can children double a year? Why? Well, all these things. Why standard teaching methods? Why standardized exams, etc. And every question, we've been researching them according to a fixed format. First of all, the history. How did it end up this way? And it for me, and also the people I teach now, it's really helpful to understand in which time period, in which context a certain new habit was born. So you can actually relate to it and say, oh yeah, only it was born in that time, and a certain type of thinking, and now we have new insights. So we can, distance ourselves from that thinking, and not taking it completely for granted, but thinking about it. So, and the other things we research are the advantages and disadvantages and the alternatives. And this, actually, it is engineering work, right? It's figuring out why it is this way and how it works. So the engineer is still inside of me. But also what I learned at Layar. So we were on this completely forefront of technology, right? And from day one, we needed Android programmers, augmented reality experts, etc. And of course, they could not have been educated in an institution because that's not how the institutions work. That's not how curricula work. Curricula need to be built up in years of experience, and they take a lot of time to actually be accredited. And then you need time to study it. And in technology, obviously, you're always, like some people say, it's history lessons. We literally got people from university with their programming, their informatics, computer science, and they were still graduating in Flash programming, which was already killed by Steve Jobs 4 years before that. But the people from the university said, well, if you know how to program, you know how to program. If you learn Flash, you can. And my CTO, he said, well, that's saying the same as as if you can speak Italian, you can speak Chinese, because that's also a foreign language, right? So that was pretty insane. So in Layar, actually our stars, our superheroes in our organization were almost always the dropouts from school. They were the artists. They were the crazy fools who would, work in the middle of the night, or and get up really late in the morning and come to the office with their unicorn helmet on and just be coding. And when we were such a big hit, we received we were, for example, I remember we were hiring a chief marketing officer, and we were receiving the most amazing CVs from people graduating from Harvard, or even the former CMO of Microsoft. And I was like, wow, those people are wanting to work with us. And they had these big star CVs, and we could not use, they could not understand our way of working, so they were worthless for us. And yeah, this is still what's happening today. So many people who are brought up in the systemic thinking, in systems thinking, they have a hard time thriving in our more organic way of working, and to really understand what is needed here and now. And yeah, that is something that I already learned at Layar, that's actually, yeah, the best people are the ones who were self-directed, self-educated, who were just in touch with what the world needs today.
It sounds very antithetical to be hiring or working with teachers who dropped out, don't have titles. It feels more of that type of environment. In your work that you're doing, Claire, are you specifically focusing on the Netherlands? Because of course there's, we talk about Finland being a bastion, the Asia system of education, so on.
Yeah.
What's your ambition with Operation Education?
Yeah, so I did choose an English name because I've always been and felt internationally connected. And it is a global quest. Yes, every country and every system has its own specifics, basically, but still globally we do more or less the same things. We all use the PISA ranking system, the same standardized tests, basically. So it is a global phenomenon, but I, for practical reasons, also having 3 children in the time that I actually built up all of this, I wanted to be close to home. And nowadays, well, with the pandemic, it's still it is much easier to work globally from home. But I still see that the way the things we've built up and the things we've learned here in the Netherlands will have its international reach and its international usage someday. And I have been giving keynotes in German for the German people. And of course, I have been on stages in all places in Europe, and I still receive reactions from my TED Talk from all across the globe. But mostly is, and we're talking about the Finnish system, but it also has its flaws, obviously.
Sure.
It is not the ideal system, and it works in the Finnish context, in the Finnish history. And, every country has its own context. And what we should not forget is that, yes, the people who are leading the change are usually the ones who have not been conditioned with the system that much, but also most of our work is to actually realign people with what they have inside of them. Also, the people who have been conditioned in the system, most of them are capable to, sort of get the system out of themselves and realign with what they truly feel is the right thing to do. So there's a lot of transformational work. We actually, we unleash the transformation of the system. We accelerate the transformation of the system, and mostly it starts with the transformation of humans, of people. Because all of us have in some way been conditioned by this is simply the way it works. So that's most of the work we do, and also it is just a big celebration to work to see people thrive again, and to see them blossom, to see them get the twinkles back in their eyes when they actually find themselves back again, and find their purpose again, and live and put the things that they believe in into practice, and especially when it comes to education. So we, of course, we need these radical transformers and these pioneers, because they just do it, and most others, they need to be ignited, basically, and that's a lot of work I do: ignite, unleash, and enable.
So Steve Jobs, I think he says, we are the crazy
crazy
people.
ones. Yeah, indeed.
You lost. I did want to get into the ecosystem, and I just want to quickly ask this, which is that the ecosystem, I assume, has to include society broadly, government, parents, because education isn't just about learning academic stuff. It's about life, and if the parents aren't enrolled in the system, then that's going to cut things off very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. By default. I'm studying a lot of how ecosystems work, and how tribes and regenerative cultures, and I read and listen a lot to people who work on that. And there's a lot we can learn from nature, and a thriving ecosystem by default consists of a lot of different species, a lot of different perspectives, a lot of different types of people, different backgrounds. So it is obvious. So we indeed try to have as many different thinkers as possible, or doers and visionaries and actors, and indeed. And the interesting thing is that we are figuring out while doing how we do this. How do we deal with money in this ecosystem world? How do we structure it? How do we scale? Because I have always seen or wanted to be an exponential organization, and not become exponentially large, but have exponential impact. And I see the exponential impact happening if we manage to unleash a school leader, so that the school leader starts to lead by example, and starts to put whatever they have on their website into practice themselves. Then that by default means they make space for the teachers to do that, right? And the teachers, they lead by example to the students, and the students, they lead by example for their children and grandchildren, and etc. So that's how I see exponential effects, exponential impact can work. And it's, I heard myself say this last week when I did this exercise on, aligning myself. And the thing we have to work on most is the inner transformation of people. We have completely lost the sense of who we are and why we are here, and what we're supposed to do in our life. And we are so conditioned to look at what society thinks of us, thinks or expects us to do. No, the answers are all inside of us. And so it's all starting with the inner transformation of realigning what we as individuals are here to do, and putting our own, making sure that our actions become more and more in line with what we are supposed to do. And also, if you don't know what you're supposed to do, then to be on that quest, on that search, and interacting with life, and becoming better at it, basically. And because once people are aligned with themselves, they become like good people. Usually, they become loving, respectful, peaceful, happy, healthy, etc. It's sort of, and you don't have to be happy every hour of the day. Life has a lot of challenges, but it also becomes a matter of sort of not only enduring the challenges, but learning to take the challenges as, hey, these are the challenges that life actually brings to me, and learning to sort of almost celebrating the challenges or at
well, if you
least
can imagine, Claire, that is exactly the topic of my book, which is how being yourself makes you a better leader. I could have said how being yourself makes you a better person. So way on board with you. Last question for you, and it's probably the most fundamental question I think that can unleash a lot of things, which is, how does one determine success?
yeah, it is by default different for every human in every situation, in every context. To me, success is more of a feeling of freedom, of joy, of being completely okay with life. And learning from challenges, learning from difficult situations. It's more of it's a deep inner feeling, I think. And success, for me with Operation Education is a feeling of being of value for others. Every time that I work with a team and I see these eyes, starting to twinkle, and people start to and people start to have the real important conversations with each other, even if they're a difficult conversation. That's when I feel success. It's about meaning. It's about purpose. Yeah, that is success. And it can be very small and very big at the same time.
Love it. On these lovely words, Claire, I want to thank you for sharing your passion, giving us some inspiration, also some ideas, maybe how to get the twinkle in our eyes. Continue on. How can anyone track you down, Claire, or at least participate? What type of help can anyone provide for you? What are you looking for, and where can they go?
Yeah, so first of all, our website is operation.education. It is still in Dutch, and we're lacking behind in transforming.
Godverdamme.
But Google Translate does a good job.
Oh, good.
So that's good. On LinkedIn, I am Claire Boonstra. So those are the most important sources. On Facebook, we are Operation Education Global. And how can people? I'm easily. You can easily find me on the social or even contact forms on our site, etc. Or send me an email at claire@operationeducation.nl or contact@operationeducation.nl. The most important thing you could do is spread the word. You could invite me to the stage. I love to speak. I love to exchange thoughts. First of all, mainly put the things you find important yourself into practice, especially if you're a parent to children or learning yourself, really think about what you truly think is important to learn in life and act upon that. And stop doing the things that do not contribute.
Amen, Claire.
Thanks for having listened to this episode of the Minter Dialogue podcast. If you like the show and would like to support me, please consider a donation on patreon.com/MinterDial. You can also subscribe on your favorite podcast service. And as ever, rating and reviews are the real currency for podcasts. You'll find the show notes with over 2,000 and more blog posts on minterdial.com. Check out my documentary film and 4 books, including my last one, You Lead, How Being Yourself Makes You a Better Leader. And to finish, here's a song I wrote with Stephanie Singer, A Convinced Man.
A stranger tucked around me, precipitating the danger stranger to feel free. Trust is the reason, still I won't toe the line. I sit here passively, hope for your respect, anticipating the thrill of your intellect. Maybe I tell myself there's no use in me lying. I'm a convinced man building an urge. I'm a convinced man to live and die submerged. A convinced man in the arms of a woman. I'm a convinced man, challenge my fate. I'm a convinced man, competition's innate. A convinced man in the arms of a woman. Despise revenges and struggle with deceit. Live for the challenge so life's not incomplete. What's wrong with challenge? I know soon we all die. I like the feel of a stranger tucked around me, precipitating the danger to feel free. Trust in my reason and let me show you why. I'm a convinced man practicing my lines. I'm a convinced man here in these confines. A convinced man in the arms of a woman. I'm a convinced man, admit to the test. I'm a convinced man, I'm ready for an arrest. I'm a convinced man in the arms of a woman.